Welcome to the Alignment Yoga blog. Today I'd like to talk a bit more about grounding. Grounding is a very important part of yoga, and I hear it mentioned very often as I go and teach in various facilities. People talk about grounding, they talk about rootedness. But the interesting thing I find that the speaking of it doesn't necessarily translate into the acting on it. And it's interesting to see is that the human experience is that of being between heaven and earth. And the key terminology is that we're between. We're neither one nor the other, but we're both. And so often I see in the yoga world the emphasis on lifting up, the emphasis on extending, the emphasis on lifting the chest, holding the head high. We see a deficiency in groundedness. Well, a good question might be, well, why do we care about that deficiency in groundedness? One of the main things I see is that when we aren't grounded, there tends to be a lot of anxiety. And that anxiety can present itself any of a number of ways. It may be as simple as worrying about whether we're doing our yoga correctly. Most of the time that's anxiety. Or it may come in terms of worrying about whether we're doing enough yoga, or worrying about whether we're eating enough foods, or the right foods, or worrying about whether we are going to have enough money to pay the bills, or insomnia. And those are things I find are epidemic in yoga communities. And so often what's underneath it is just pure old-fashioned anxiety. So one of the best antidotes we have for anxiety is to be grounded, to be rooted. And so how you work with the feet in the yoga standing poses is one of the most powerful tools we have in our toolkit to learn what it means to be grounded. And if you can learn to be grounded in your yoga poses, there's a much better chance that as you walk through your day, as you go to your job, as you work with your kids, that you're going to be calmer, you're going to be steadier, and there's a darn good chance that your anxiety level is going to notch down a whole bunch of steps the more you learn how to be grounded. So when we talk about groundedness, it could seem like a foregone conclusion that doing a standing pose is inherently an act of grounding. But interestingly, a number of the standing poses actually invite us to sort of lift up and out of our bodies. The triangle pose in particular is one of the most ungrounding poses unless we have an awareness of how it is that our feet actually relate to the ground. So when I teach triangle pose, I very often speak of the front edge of the heel. So what do I mean by the front edge of the heel? What made it a little bit easier to see is I've put this black dot at the front edge of the heel. So the front edge of the heel here, you'll see it corresponds to the shaft of the shin bone coming straight down through. And I envision that front edge of the heel is like an eye. And that I could be closed, that I could be squinty, or that I could be open. Your standing poses are going to be most grounded if that front edge of the heel, that eye, is wide open, looking directly into the floor. Okay, so what would that look like? So I take my feet farther apart, turn one foot in, one foot out, and what I'm feeling right now is that front edge of the heel, that eye is closed. So right now, if I did a pose, triangle pose for example, it wouldn't be as grounded as if that eye were open. So I bend the knee, I go toward Virabhadrasana 2, and I lift that heel ever so slightly off the floor. That heel's about a thickness of a credit card lifted off the floor. And then I take that heel and I pull that heel out of the toes, as if I was going to elongate the foot. And in that process, that front edge of the heel, that eye is now wide open. So keeping that heel drawing out of the toes, keeping the front edge of the heel, the eye open, I then place the heel back on the floor. So my challenge now is, can I keep that eye open? How far can I straighten the knee without closing that eye? And what a lot of yoga students will find is they can't straighten this knee very far before they lose their groundedness. So for a lot of students, this right here is their triangle pose. Grounding, more important for most of us than straightening the leg. And what you'll find over time, though, is you can keep that front edge of the heel, the eye open, and straighten the leg all the way. So as you practice your standing poses, the front edge of the heel, the eye open looking into the earth. Thanks for checking out our blog.